watched it on TV.
All things Randi at RandiRhodes.com.
Go for launch.
Speaking truth to power, the Randi Rhodes Show.
We were thinking that this challenge would have a fair amount of traction with a 6-3 conservative court, but sort of pretty early on, it became clear that at least some of the conservative justices did not seem totally on board with this. I would say the two moments that really stood out in my mind were when Justice Amy Coney Barrett mentioned that some of the members of the anti-abortion medical group that is challenging these provisions that expanded access to the abortion drug mifepristone, that some of those medical professionals are in fact dentists. That suggested she had given a fair amount of scrutiny to their membership. And then we ended up for much of the rest of the argument debating whether two specific doctors had shown that they were going to be negatively impacted. And then the other one was in part of your setup there when we heard Justice Neil Gorsuch say that he thought that this case raised the problem of universal injunctions. That issue of nationwide injunctions has become a kind of a bugaboo in recent years, especially for conservative legal scholars. And for him to say that in this case suggested that it's very likely that he's going to reject the notion of blocking the FDA's moves on this abortion drug.
Did you hear what Josh just said there? Did you hear what Josh Gerstein just said? There were only two doctors that were able to even claim that they would ever come across a woman in that particular situation having an adverse effect, a side effect from mifepristone, even though they were 100 miles away from ever seeing a woman having side effects from mifepristone, had never prescribed mifepristone, had never ever come across a woman needing care after a side effect from mifepristone. But they were claiming that they had been injured by the idea that that could happen to them sometime, somewhere, and that was a bridge too far. But did you hear him say that the other doctors, upon deeper questioning by none other than the handmaid herself, the woman who collects children like keepsake stocks, Amy Coney Barrett, actually was able to deduce from the question and answers that the doctors under this umbrella organization were dentists? It's the wrong end of the woman. Talk about not knowing which end is up. Oh my God. That's like having a dentist testify about a proctologist, complaining that he didn't want to treat you on that end of the, but he's a dentist talking about polyps and polyp removal. I mean, it's so bizarre. It's so strange. So when I heard that, and I also understood that they had been judge shopping. Here, I'm going to let Josh finish his little sentiment here, because he was in the courtroom yesterday, okay?
Then, Josh, how did this case get this far?
How did it?
Well, I mean, part of the answer, Stephanie, is this phenomenon that has developed in the last few years of groups being able to file these cases in specific parts of the country, in specific divisions of federal courts, where they know which judge the case will be assigned to. Or, if they don't know for sure, maybe they know to a 90% or a 95% level of certainty. And this case was assigned to Matthew Kaczmarek, who's a federal judge, who's a Trump appointee, who sits in Amarillo, Texas, and he used to work for a Christian legal organization. So you can understand why, of all the judges in the country, this group would have wanted to put it in front of. They chose him. And you have to think that that had some impact on the rulings that were issued.
Some impact on the ruling. Okay, so here's what I took from that. Who knew they were a bunch of dentists yesterday? I did not know until Josh Gerstein, who was in the courtroom, said, it's interesting because Justice Amy Coney Barrett said, what kind of medicine do you practice that you feel that you might have to treat? Oh, we're dentists. What? Dentists. Okay, so then he expands on how did a case with dentists as the plaintiffs talking about being harmed or injured by having to treat somebody having an adverse effect to mifepristone even pass muster in the lower courts. How did it get so far? And then he says, well, they know what they're doing, these legal organizations, these Christian nationalist legal organizations. They actually put forward federal judges' names for Donald Trump and Mitch McConnell to sign off on, and to cede certain district courts and certain federal courts, certain appeals courts with these evangelical legal practitioners, so that people who are looking to make money off of challenging well-established precedent and well-established law, like Roe or like mifepristone or like any of the, they can make money. They can make a crap load of money. They go to Kaczmarek. Kaczmarek says, yes, you can proceed. I think you have a case here. The defendant, in this case, the manufacturer of mifepristone, forget what the name of the laboratory is, but they actually, sue, saying, what are you what is wrong with you? This drug has been on the market for 24 years in the United States, and prior to the United States, it was on the market for 20 years in Europe. This is an old drug, just like Roe was an old law. So they're very careful, though, about, these national injunctions, meaning you can't sell mifepristone nationally, right? We don't want to do a national injunction because we want to give all these, decisions back to the state. That's why he said these national injunctions are sort of a bugaboo in the conservative legal realm, right? Because they don't want a federal abortion ban. They don't want mifepristone being banned federally, because that will take the gravy train away from all these lawyers that want to do it in this state and that state, but not in this state, and over here, no, and over there, yes, and whatever, right? But it seems to me like they're doing this just for billable hours. That's so interesting when you consider that Fani Willis was accused of hiring her friend, who she apparently had benefits with, right? She's entitled to have a life. But they accused her of hiring Nathan Wade for billable hours, for the exploitation of billable hours, and that he would bill the state for his hours as a special research prosecutor in Fani Willis's case, thereby enriching herself and him through the exploitation of this case, right? And dragging out this case, even though it's Donald Trump who's dragging out this case. Fani would love to have a court date, and she would love to make it, August 5th. She's already said that. But also, his billable hours, as we found out in the hearing, are capped. So that is something that wasn't available to them. But why would they even think that? Because they're doing it. They're doing it. They're riding the billable hours gravy train all the way to the Supreme Court, knowing they're representing dentists. And that this whole thing is a sham. That, my friends, is unethical. And Josh Hawley's wife needs to go before the bar. Her license needs to be revoked. Bringing sham cases like that's Giuliani. Don't have time to listen to the live show? Want to hear more on your schedule? Go to randyrhodes.com and buy a stinking podcast.